In 1960, a British car did 0 to 60 in comfortably under 8 seconds and kept pulling all the way to 140 miles an hour. It cornered flat, it stopped on 4 disc brakes at a time when most cars still had drums. And the most respected motoring magazine in the country climbed out of it and called it the most electrifying thing they had ever tested. It was quicker than an Aston Martin. It ran with cars that cost 3 times the money. Chevrolet in Detroit took one look and agreed to build the engines themselves. And then almost nobody bought it. Fewer than 100 were ever made. Sit a room full of people down today and ask them to name it, and you'll get silence. It even wore a badge that made no sense. Not a stag, not a lion, a tortoise. The slowest animal alive, sitting on the nose of one of the fastest cars in Britain. Stay with me, because by the end you'll understand exactly why. This is the story of the Gordon-Keeble, the British sports car that, even when it was brand new, most of the country never knew existed. In the early 60s, Britain built the world's sports cars. The Americans made them big and soft, the Italians made them beautiful and difficult. If you wanted something small, quick and alive in your hands, you bought British, an MG, a Healey, a Triumph. And in 1961, Jaguar walked onto the stage at Geneva with the E-Type and stopped the room. So Britain didn't have a speed problem, Britain had a gap. Because for all those brilliant cars, there was one thing almost nobody here was building, the complete Grand Tourer. A car with genuine supercar pace that you could also start on a cold Monday, drive across the country and climb out of without wrecking your back. Ferrari performance without the Ferrari tantrums and without the Ferrari price. That was the whole. And 2 men thought they could fill it. The first was John Gordon. He'd come out of a small firm called Peerless, a struggling little outfit that built a neat fiberglass sports car from Triumph parts and spent most of its short life running out of money. Gordon knew how hard this game was. He'd already watched one company sink under him. The second was Giorgetto, an engineer, the kind of man who didn't theorize about a problem so much as walk over, look at it and fix it. Gordon had the vision and the contacts, Keeble had the hands. Between them, they shared one stubborn idea that Britain could build a car to beat the world, on its own terms, from a shed. They just needed proof the idea would work. And the proof arrived by accident. An American serviceman stationed in Britain, a United States Air Force pilot named Nielsen, came to Keeble with an unusual request. He owned one of those little Peerless sports cars, and he wanted far more out of it. He wanted an American V8 dropped into it. So Keeble did exactly that. He worked a big Chevrolet engine into that small British chassis, and the result was electric. Here was a car with the muscle of Detroit and the manners of Britain, and it went like nothing either man had driven. That was the moment the whole thing caught fire. Not a boardroom, not a business plan. One favour for a fighter pilot. Gordon and Keeble looked at what they'd built and saw the formula staring back at them. American power, British engineering. Now they had to turn it into a real car. Keeble started from the ground up in the winter of 1959. He designed a proper chassis, a space frame of square steel tube, light and stiff, with a Dédion rear axle and disc brakes on all 4 wheels. This was serious engineering, the kind of thing that belonged under a racing car, not a road car built by 2 men and a dream. For the engine, they went American again. A 4.6-litre Chevrolet Corvette V8, making close to 300 horsepower. Simple, strong, and able to run 100,000 miles without an argument. That was the whole point, a supercar you could actually live with, but a car like this needed a body to match. And here Gordon did something bold. He took the bare chassis to Turin, to the great Italian design house Bertone. The head of the firm, Nuccio Bertone, handed the job to a designer who had been there barely any time at all, a 21-year-old named Giorgetto Giugiaro. Today he's considered one of the greatest car designers who ever lived. Back then this was only the second car he had ever designed, and he delivered something extraordinary. A clean, low, elegant coupe with 4 headlights set in a distinctive slanted line across the nose. Here's the part that tells you everything about the pace of this project. From bare chassis to a complete finished painted show car, Bertone built that body in 27 days, under a month. The car was registered, given the name the Gordon GT, and pointed at the biggest stage in the motoring world. March 1960, the Geneva Motor Show. The Gordon GT was the only genuinely all-new car on the floor, and it stopped people dead. A British car with Italian looks and a story nobody could quite believe. The reaction was immediate and enormous. Then came the part that should have made it. In an era when nobody let the press near an unfinished prototype, Gordon-Keeble were so confident they handed the car to Autocar and said, "Test it properly." And Autocar did. They ran it hard for thousands of miles, and their verdict was the line I gave you at the start. The most electrifying vehicle they had ever tested, 140 miles an hour, 0 to 60 in a time that shamed cars, twice the price. Then Gordon got on a plane to Detroit and walked the car straight into General Motors. He sat down in front of two of the most important men in the American car industry, Chevrolet's Ed Cole and the legendary engineer Zora Arkus Duntov, the father of the Corvette. They drove it, and they agreed, there and then, to supply the engines and gearboxes and to open the door to their American dealer network. Take stock of where this car was. Rave reviews, a world-class design, guaranteed American power, a supply deal with the biggest car company on earth. By any measure, the Gordon GT had already won. It should have been one of the great British success stories. So here's the question that haunts this whole story. How does a car with everything, the speed, the looks, the reviews, the backing of General Motors itself, end up as a car almost nobody has heard of? How do you go from the Star of Geneva to fewer than 100 cars and a quiet death? The answer isn't a rival. It isn't a crash, or a scandal, or a better car coming along. The Gordon-Keeble was killed by a single number. We'll get to that number. But first, the badge. Between that triumphant prototype and the car that finally reached the public, plenty changed, including the emblem on the nose. When the production car was being photographed for its first publicity shots, out on the grounds where it was built, someone's pet tortoise wandered into frame. And instead of shooing it away, somebody set it on the bonnet. A joke, the slowest creature alive, sitting on one of the fastest cars in the country. The joke stuck. They made the tortoise the official badge. Whether every detail of that story is true, nobody's entirely sure. But the tortoise was real, and it went on every car. Sit with the irony of that. A 140-mile-an-hour machine wearing the badge of an animal, famous for going nowhere in a hurry. It turned out to be the most honest thing about the whole enterprise, because by the time this car reached the road, it had been standing still for years. That was the problem. The Gordon GT stunned the world in 1960. But stunning the world and building the thing are two completely different jobs. It took until 1964, 4 years, for the production car to go on sale. By then, plenty had changed. The car had a new name, the one we know it by, the Gordon-Keeble. The body was now moulded in fiberglass, so the shape could be made in numbers. There was a bigger engine, the 5.4-litre Chevrolet, still around 300 horsepower. And it was launched properly, revealed to the press at the Savoy Hotel in London. It was still a magnificent car. But 4 years is a long time in the motor trade. The E-Type was everywhere now. The thing that had dropped Jaws in 1960 was, by 1964, merely very good. The Gordon-Keeble had spent its best years sitting in a queue, and it was about to run straight into that single, fatal number. Here it is. They priced the car at around £2,800. That sounds like a lot for 1964. It wasn't nearly enough. This was a hand-built car, a space-frame chassis, an Italian-designed body, 4-wheel disc brakes, 140 miles per hour top speed. It was built to run with Aston Martin and Ferrari, cars that cost far more, and they sold it for barely more than a well-spec'd E-Type, for less in real terms than it cost them to build. Read that again, because it's the whole tragedy in one line. They lost money on every single car they sold. The better it went, the faster they bled. No cushion, no margin, nothing in reserve. Every car out of the door made the hole deeper. A business like that only survives if nothing goes wrong. Something went wrong. The firm that supplied their steering went on strike, and with no steering parts coming in, the production line simply stopped. Finished cars couldn't be finished, costs climbed while nothing could be sold. For a company with millions in the bank, a supplier strike is a headache. For a company already losing money on every car with no reserves at all, it was fatal. By 1965, Gordon-Keeble went under. John Gordon had already stepped away. There was a brief second life, fresh money came in, the company was renamed. A handful more cars trickled out, but by 1967 it was bankrupt again. The very last car was assembled by the workforce out of leftover spare parts. An American even bought the rights, badged a couple of the cars as his own at the New York show, and promised a grand production run that never came. When the counting was done, the total was 99 cars. 99! A car that had beaten the world at Geneva, built in numbers you could fit in a single car park. And here's the twist that makes this one ache. The car was never the problem. The engineering was superb. The design was the work of a future legend. The people who bought them adored them. Every failure here was a business failure. The price, the delays, the timing, the strike. The Gordon-Keeble didn't die because it was bad. It died because two brilliant men were better at building cars than at running a company. It was undone exactly as the badge quietly promised, not by speed, but by everything around it. But now the last piece. Of those 99 cars, almost everyone still exists. Around 90 survivors out of 100 built. That fiberglass body doesn't rust, and the people lucky enough to own one never let go. It's one of the highest survival rates of any car ever made. So the British sports car that nobody knew existed never actually disappeared. It's still out there, in barns, in collections, on club runs down country lanes on a Sunday morning, quietly worth a small fortune now. Britain didn't lose the Gordon-Keeble. Britain just never looked. And that little tortoise is still on the nose of nearly every one of them, having in the end outlasted almost everything that was meant to beat it.